A new report from the Washington Post on Wednesday found that President Trump had gotten a little angry at Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. Now, this was Mnuchin had been warning, of course, the president about the potential economic damage of the COVID-19 outbreak. Now, on Monday, Trump had urged Mnuchin to pressure Fed Chair Jerome Powell, who the Treasury Secretary reportedly encouraged the president to appoint to his current position, to do more for the economy. The Post called Trump's direction to Mnuchin as an explosive tirade, right? Okay, so look, as a result of this, a little bit of breaking news. You have the Federal Reserve now using its emergency powers to inject about $1.5 trillion into the markets to try to stabilize them after massive stock losses that we've been receiving all week since COVID-19 has really injected a lot of fear into the markets. Okay, so now here's the thing, right? So now one of the things that the Fed had been doing previously is lowering interest rates. That's what Donald Trump has been very invested in doing. You need to lower the interest rates more. But wait, the problem is that we already have really low interest rates. You can't lower them all that much more and have any sort of stimulative effect. I mean, the last time interest rates were lowered, I think, were last week, when it had about a 10-minute effect on the markets, and then right back down. So, look, even this morning, stock losses were so large that it tripped the emergency breaker and shut off trading. And so that's happened twice this week. That's disastrous. Now, the other problem with low interest rates as well is that, and we've seen this again, reflected in the stock market and also reflected in oil companies or fossil fuel companies, is that these companies, specifically shale, have over-leveraged themselves. Now, that basically means they took out a lot of loans because of the low interest rate and racked up a ton of corporate debt. Okay, well, that is a problem because if prices go down, which they have in fossil fuels, well, then a lot of these companies will not be able to repay that debt if this continues, right? And so I'm not quite sure how much that $1.5 trillion is going to go to alleviate that corporate debt. But it certainly seems like they're trying to stabilize the market by bringing stock prices back up so it doesn't end up going into recession. So look, the cutting in of the interest rates, again, I just told you that they can't do that anymore. That's why they went to an emergency stimulus package, right? To put more money into that into the markets. But look, here's the thing: the Fed is basically running out of ammunition in order to do anything. They've got really nothing left in their arsenal other than emergency stimulus, right? In order to ward off a recession. And as COVID-19 continues to scare the crap out of the markets, and people are isolating, global trade is having supply chain issues, et cetera, well, a recession looks even more possible now today than it has before. Now, the Post explains that on Monday, the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell more than 2,000 points. It's down more than 5,000 points since February 12th. Now, you had OPEC and the Saudis also refusing to make a deal with each other. That caused oil prices to plummet, oil futures to plummet, and these oil companies now, just like these other corporations, saddled with a lot of debt from these low-interest loans, they're now in danger of going bankrupt. Again, that emergency stimulus, right? So this is a terrible situation, right? And a lot of it is brought in part by, again, external market forces, external forces with no control, but also a terrible, inept response by an administration that was obviously underprepared for any of this. I mean, now, who is Trump mainly blaming for this? Well, not his administration. No, his administration is flawless and perfect and all that stuff. No, they're blaming someone else because it's always someone else, right? And so now this brings me back to Trump with Mnuchin, who had a little bit of an outburst, or is described by the Washington Post as more of an eruption, right? And said that it's unlike many others due to the political and economic stress that has gripped the White House as of recently. Now, it has caused some White House aides to worry that the president's fury with Powell could lead to upheaval and economic woes if he continues to lash out at the Federal Reserve. Well, again, he's been attacking the Federal Reserve. And even long before this COVID-19 stuff had come up, Donald Trump had been saying to the Federal Reserve, keep cutting interest rates so that we can get more loans. But that doesn't make sense from a long-term perspective, especially when you're supposed to have a relatively good economy, which, again, you had low unemployment and a lot of job creation before COVID-19, of course. And so there was no real reason to continue to keep interest rates that low and to continue cutting them more. But Donald Trump doesn't know what he's talking about or doesn't know what he's doing. So he's like, keep cutting it. So these corporations can take out more loans and end up being over leveraged. Look, one thing that Donald Trump understands is that he understands taking out loans and then going bankrupt. He's only done it about 6 times. And so he doesn't get anything else. Just take out more debt. I'm the king of debt. Let's do more debt. Even part of his stimulus is loaning out $500 billion in low interest government loans to these shale companies. I mean, come on. That's not a solution. More debt to corporations that are already in massive debt is not a solution. It's not a long-term solution. So now, as far as this, look, we've got an upheaval, right? The CDC says we should avoid contact with other people as much as possible. Stay home, self-quarantine, especially if you're sick. Now, look, I'm an introvert, so I don't really care. I can, self-quarantine all I want. But a lot of people can't do that. They can't afford that. You got bills to pay, and bill collectors aren't going to say, hey, look, we're just going to let you go because, hey, we understand COVID-19, self-quarantine. No, they're going to continue to demand your money for those bills. And, of course, you have to get food, etc. And so we need policy that helps regular people. Now, what would be excellent is if we expanded healthcare to everybody. I mean, you could see how that would be beneficial during a pandemic, right? Very, very helpful. Or look, it doesn't have to be Medicare for all. It could be an emergency expansion of Medicaid, right? So that it covers anybody who doesn't have insurance, regardless of whatever, right? If you don't have insurance, sign up. We'll give you emergency Medicaid until this blows over. Okay, that makes sense. And now, I believe they've waived the co-pays, premiums, and deductibles for, everyone who's going through this, current health crisis, right? But you could also do things like Italy. They froze mortgage payments. You could also have things like emergency rent payments that are federally subsidized until this blows over. Even an emergency UBI would help. And of course, I believe they're working on doing free testing. Now, all of this, of course, is extremely doable. But instead, they would like to give, the Federal Reserve has basically been asked to give $1.5 trillion of emergency relief to the stock market. Doesn't really help regular people. And so, interestingly enough, though, if he did take some of those more bolder steps to help regular working people, well, that could help Donald Trump in his reelection, since that's what he cares about, right? He could show some leadership. He could make a good case for his reelection because he could show, well, I actually did something in a crisis. There was a crisis, and I helped regular working people. Well, unfortunately, he's not a leader. He's basically doing everything he can to protect his own because that's, unfortunately, all that Donald Trump cares about. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.